Prepare yourself for a very disturbing set of photos. When a man and his wife get lost in the Rocky Mountains, they soon discover they're being watched. Soon they come face to face with strange entities in the woods, and they manage to take a photo of them. Brilliant author Worchester Street shares this chilling story with us with a simple proclamation. There's something unnatural in the Rocky Mountains. Check out Worcester Street's channel or Reddit page with the links in the description if you enjoy this creepy tale. Also, YouTube has decided that the sub button is silly, and now they're showing you what they want on your sub feed. Just look at this tweet admitting it. So literally the only way for some of you to find my newest videos is to click the notification bell, and maybe even frequently search Darkness Prevails on the YouTube app. It's dire times, and I don't think YouTube wants small channels on their platform anymore. Thank you for listening. Now on to the story. We've gone to visit my wife Sarah's family every summer since we got married 4 years ago. They live in a small town way up in the mountains. Her parents own a lot of land, so we would spend our time riding ATVs and hiking trails. Here's a picture I took of their house a while back, so you can see the kind of place they have. Not too long ago, I took a week off work and we drove up to spend time with Sarah's parents and siblings. It was a good time, and the week passed by way too quickly. Sunday soon rolled around, and we loaded up our crappy old sedan for the drive home. We left her parents' place in the late afternoon and had started winding our way down the mountain towards the highway when Sarah sighed. Great, check it out. She handed me her phone. It showed that the highway was red with traffic for something like 25 miles on the highway. Must have been some accident. I guess we'll be sitting in traffic for a while, Sarah said. I pulled to the side of the road and pulled out my own phone. I soon found that there was a long winding trail that cut through the mountains for nearly 50 miles that would finally rejoin the highway after the traffic ended. I figured that going slow on an old winding road was way better than sitting in stop-and-go traffic for 5 or more hours. Sarah was against the decision. When I asked her why, she just told me she had a bad feeling about it. Still, somehow, I convinced her that we'd be just fine. So instead of turning right and heading down towards the highway, we turned left and headed deeper into the mountains. The road turned to dirt pretty quick. Sarah jumped into the back seat so she could stretch out, and she recorded some of what we saw out the window. I was shocked at how deserted it was. I mean, we only passed one house over the entire hour, and not a single car. Sarah recorded some of the video of the drive, which you can see here. We'd been on the road for a little over an hour when we came around a hill. Up ahead, there was a single crashed car just off the road. I pulled off to the side of the road and got out to take a closer look. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but realized that I no longer had any signal, not even roaming. I took a picture of it, which I can show here. I came around to the driver's side of that car and saw that the driver's window had been shattered and there was no sign of the driver anywhere. Sarah walked to the front of the car and put her hand on the hood. The engine's cold. That means it's been at least a couple hours since the crash, right? Are we the first people to drive by? She asked. I told her I didn't know, but she's probably right, given with how few people we'd seen. Sarah pointed to the broken glass from the window. There's a lot of glass inside the car. If the driver busted it to get out, wouldn't it make sense that it'd be out on the ground beside the car? She said. She was right. The inside of the car was littered with the safety glass from the window. I looked closer and saw flecks of blood covering some of the surfaces too. Where was the driver? I didn't like this, not at all. I told Sarah that we needed to go, and we'd call somebody once we had a cell signal. She agreed, and we hopped back into our car. I turned the key in the ignition and heard the rapping clicking noise that meant our battery was dead. I popped my hood and saw that there was a bunch of corrosion built up on my battery terminal. I swore under my breath. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. I told her it meant that there wasn't a good connection between the battery and the motor, and that the battery was probably dead. We could fix the corrosion, but we would need a jump to get the car started again. I talked the problem over with Sarah. We were already dozens of miles from her parents' place, and we had no signal. Based on the car wreck, it was likely we wouldn't see any more traffic for hours at best, and days at worst. On top of all of that, the sun was beginning to get low in the sky. We needed to find someone with jumper cables. I remembered that we passed a house a few miles back on the road. I figured it'd be best if Sarah stayed with our car on the side of the road, so I started walking back up the road by myself. It took me a little more than an hour of walking before I saw the house again. The house had a strange architecture, with part of the top floor hanging over the lower floor. I saw there was a small garage in the woods behind the house. Here's a picture of the place. I walked up to the door and I knocked, calling out as I did so. There was no answer. I walked to a window next to the door and looked through. The inside was abandoned, but I saw that there was a message scrawled on the wall. I looked closer and could just barely make out the words, which said, "They can't see you if you don't make noise." I read it over and over. They can't see you if you don't make noise. What were they talking about? I checked my phone again, but still had no signal. I yelled out for help, but heard nothing in response. Judging by the state of the place, I figured it must have been abandoned, and for a while. On top of everything else, the sky was getting dark now. I made my way towards the garage behind the house and kicked in the door. The inside was in fairly good condition still. There was an old cabinet against the wall. I opened it up and saw some rusted jumper cables and a flashlight sitting on the shelf. I figured the battery in the crashed car might still have enough charge to jump mine, so I grabbed both of them. At this point, it was completely dark outside. I started walking back toward my car and was happy to see the flashlight still worked. I was alternating walking fast and running. Something about the house and that message, it gave me a very bad feeling, and I was eager to get back to my wife. I was walking alongside the road when I heard a scuffling sound out in the woods behind me. I stopped and looked back for a long moment. That's when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned my flashlight forward, and I saw something. It was standing behind a tree. It moved its head in an erratic motion, constantly twitching. It looked like a gigantic spider with a human's head. Its eyes reflected the light of my flashlight like headlights. I heard more motion in the woods behind it, and my muscles locked into place. I gripped my phone hard and accidentally pulled the volume button, which I have set to take a picture on my phone's camera. The phone made the clicking camera noise. At the sound, the creature snapped its head in my direction and began moving around the tree. I pulled my arm back, and I threw my flashlight as hard as I could behind me on the road. The creature looked back behind me, and with its spindly legs, it began walking towards the flashlight. I noted that it moved quite slow. The moments it took to walk by me were an eternity, though. When I saw it was a dozen yards away, I started running down the road, and I didn't look back. Here's the picture I took, which basically speaks for itself. After an eternity, I reached my car, completely out of breath and full of adrenaline. Sarah opened her door and got out. "Hey, did you find any help?" she asked. I yelled for her to stay in the car, and I ran up to the crashed vehicle. I reached my hand into the broken window, and I popped open the hood. Then I ran around, and I pulled out its battery. I attached the cables I'd brought to both batteries, then Sarah turned the key to our car. I ripped the cables off of our battery, and I slammed the hood shut. Then I jumped into the driver's seat, and we sped down the road. Once we made it home, I told Sarah about what happened, and she began to bawl right then and there, telling me that she'd heard stories while growing up about the valley that we had just gotten out of, that it was the reason she was so hesitant to take the side road earlier. She never imagined how true the stories really were. I don't know what to think now. If I find anything else out, I'll let you know. Maybe it's best to watch out if you're ever out in the Rocky Mountains.